Trying to embrace exactly what's happening in China at the moment, you need to look beyond your social media feeds and some of the anti-China rhetoric. Whilst the country has come under the spotlight recently with the US-China trade war and of course the emergence of COVID-19, China continues to do what China does best: produce lots of things and export them, and increasingly innovate technology as well. This segment isn't pro or anti-China, it's just a realistic look at what's happening right now. Since China's reopening up to the West in the early 1970s, there's been a revolution. First to copy the best of the West, then sell it to them, then to become the manufacturing hub of the world, and now matching and outperforming in the innovation and technology stakes. Depending where you go in China, there's plenty in clear view to demonstrate the warp speed of the Chinese economic success. Currently the second largest economy in the world, but closing fast on the US to become the largest economy by brute GDP before the end of this decade. Since 2016, and particularly during the COVID era, that closing in on the number one spot has been accelerated. China spent the last decade expanding its foreign policy with the Belt and Road Initiative, a modern-day Silk Road that's invested heavily to connect China with the Eurasian continent, paving the way for easier trade into the future.
Oh, great Scott!
But to power this, they need speed, technology and data, the currencies of the 21st century. We've chosen just 3 short examples to help demonstrate the rapid and astonishing growth of China and its move to make its mark in this century's global economy. There's no more tangible example of speed and technology than the development of the Chinese high-speed rail network. Put bluntly, China has the largest network of modern high-speed rail in the world. More precisely, if you doubled the length of high-speed track for everywhere else in the world, China would still have more. And all this has happened in just 13 years. And before 2035, it will double its network again. This vast network is now interconnecting cities that have also doubled and tripled in size over the past 20 years. China now has 14 cities with populations of more than 5 million, with a fast, safe and convenient way of travelling between them. 800 million people have risen out of poverty in just one generation to make China's middle class the fastest growing demographic sector in the world. And they're going places, frequently at speeds between 250 and 350 kilometres per hour. And the newest maglev trains in China can reach sustained speeds of up to 425 kilometres per hour. This astonishing rail network has resulted in just one crash in 2011, where 40 people were killed when one high-speed train careened into another. But up to date, even with this crash, the Chinese high-speed rail network remains one of the safest public transport systems in the world. So why? It's all about giving everyone access to their share of the country's economic benefits, connecting more remote rural communities with the opportunities in the large cities and not just the glitzy urban hubs of Beijing and Shanghai. Or put another way, the bigger companies want easier access to the country's huge labour resource. The way they've been able to fast-track this massive high-speed network is a bit like Lego. They've got standardised tracks, electronics, carriages, communications, viaducts, all the building blocks to link cities, all out of the same box. And it's all run by one state-controlled and funded organisation. And how much does the entire network make as a profit? Well, it doesn't make a profit. The ticket costs are calculated to cover the design, construction and running costs, and that's it. This keeps the ticket prices at about a quarter of anywhere else in the world and allows just about anyone access to the network. Now this network even reaches the mountainous Tibetan city of Lhasa with a 435 kilometre rail line connecting the roof of the world with the rest of China. Some 90% of the route, which took 6 years to construct, sits higher than 3,000 metres above sea level. GM, Ford, Honda, Toyota, car brands that have been with us for decades. But in the next few decades, you'll be talking about BYD, NIO, XPeng, Wuling, Geely SAIC, and Tesla, of course. But guess where most of these cars are being manufactured? Yes, you guessed right, China. And they've gone from zero to hero in most cases in less than 20 years. Even when adding up the total cars manufactured in the second and third largest markets in the world in 2020, the US and Japan, you still don't reach the staggering 25 million cars made in China last year. The key feature about this new breed of EVs, or electronic vehicles, coming out of China is that they're not copycats or cheap versions of their Western counterparts. While some are still boxy and a bit quirky, some of these are now cars you could really love. Some of them are just stunning, packed with personality and features, and with high manufacturing standards. There's also a long new list of companies that make ancillary products for this new fleet of electronic vehicles that you've never heard of before. Much of this new technology, and many of these companies, are also headquartered in China, a hub for EV technology that's decades ahead of the rest of the world. China's both the largest manufacturer and buyer of electric vehicles in the world, accounting for more than half of all electronic cars made and sold in the world in 2018. China also makes 99% of the world's electric buses. China's embraced an electric car future which is not only innovative, but also leading the way. One of the world's biggest industries is one we barely see, but the modern world simply couldn't function without it: the semiconductor industry. Every time we start our cars, use our phones, pop up the toaster, watch a YouTube video, switch on the aircon, or play a computer game, it's all powered by microchips. They're getting smaller, smarter, and yes, faster. The technology that makes these computer chips is real science fiction stuff, with today's nanochips getting tinier and tinier and more powerful. These days we measure components of microchips in nanometers. That's a billionth of a meter. Some of the components are smaller than a virus, and the technology to develop and manufacture these tiny workhorses has become massively expensive. How many of these tiny chips are made each year? About 1 trillion. That's about 130 for each person on Earth. Without them, technology as we know it today wouldn't have advanced much past the 1950s. Again, China is leveraging itself to be the world's biggest producer of semiconductors, with trillion-dollar investments and government-sponsored programs. The key chips are the microprocessors that are manufactured by only 3 major companies in the world. The technology has become so expensive that many of the earlier players have simply been swamped by the need to innovate. They didn't have the investment grunt to come up with the continuous funding for the latest technology. The biggest producer of the advanced logic chip by far is TSMC in Taiwan. They make chips for companies like MediaTek, Nvidia, and Apple, to mention just a few. And if TSMC had a supply chain problem, hundreds of industries would suffer. And because all this is happening in Taiwan, it's a big problem, both for China, the US, and the rest of the world. Even last year, the supply chain was put to a test. With the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, industries panicked and planned for a massive drop of spending and economic activity. Orders were cancelled and postponed, but people started buying more tech to work from home, upgrading their phones to the latest models to enjoy the latest apps. Well, suddenly there was a global shortage of microchips, which inflated their cost and caused hundreds of companies to review their supply chains to protect their supply of microchips. Apart from TSMC in Taiwan, there's only 2 other producers in the world that are still in the race to produce the latest, fastest, smallest, smartest chips: Intel in the US and Samsung in South Korea. But now even Intel is starting to outsource some of its development and manufacturing to TSMC, putting more strain on how the politics between China, Taiwan and the US play out. And the stakes could not be higher. Both Intel and Samsung are now investing heavily in the next generation of microtech, but none of that will come online until the end of this decade. Meanwhile, China's already started spending trillions on designing and building its own factories to become independent of the other world suppliers, partly as an insurance and partly because it simply wants to be the world leader in tech. As you can see, this time the fight isn't over oil, this time it's microchips, and there's a lot at stake. China's fraught relationship with Taiwan, which it threatens to bring back under its communist wing, also has strong ties to the US. But you can be certain when we get to read about what's happening, it'll be brought to you by a microchip in your phone or computer. So just 3 examples about the need for speed in China, all driving the economy in ways we could never have predicted a few decades ago. The mainland, just north of Hong Kong, is the special economic zone of Shenzhen. It's now a bustling tech megacity of some 17.5 million people. Well, just 40 years ago, it was a collection of smaller towns and farming land, with a population of about 56,000. But now Shenzhen is just one of China's 14 cities with over 5 million people. Whilst segments of the West continue to huff and puff about just about anything relating to China, there are almost daily milestones emerging from the country as it continues to stamp its mark on the world of technology. Well, we hope you enjoyed our latest Thaiger story here at the Thaiger on YouTube. Plenty more to come, and if you're enjoying our content, please subscribe to the channel, and we look forward to seeing you next time.